Hey everyone, welcome to today's story. We're thrilled you're here. Get ready for a journey packed with emotions, wonder, and unforgettable moments. This isn't just another story, it's a powerful reminder of how even the quietest acts of kindness can leave a lasting mark. So, grab a seat, open your heart, and let's dive right in. Many years ago, when Elias's hair was still black and his eyes still burned with determination, he lived alone in a modest wooden cabin at the edge of Zambezi Reserve where forest followed forest, and the cries of wild animals echoed like the very heartbeat of the earth. One foggy morning, the mist hung heavy over the trees like a soaked blanket draped across the jungle. Elias happened to hear faint, weak whimpers coming from a deep ravine. Following the sound, he discovered a small creature struggling in a pile of rotting leaves, a lion cub, no more than a year old. Its front leg clamped tightly in a steel trap, blood running in thin streams, its eyes wild with panic. Without hesitation, Elias took off his jacket, knelt down in the mud and thorns, and gently lifted the trembling creature into his arms. For the next 3 months, his cabin held not only the sound of wind blowing through tin roofing, but also the rapid breaths and soft growls of a life clinging to each moment in order to survive. He cleaned the cub's wounds daily using water boiled from forest leaves, his every motion deliberate and gentle. He cooked thin porridge with tender venison, spooning each small mouthful patiently. Every night, when the cub cried from pain, he would sit beside it, lay his hand upon its tangled fur, and whisper silent comforts like a father soothing a wounded child. And then, as if it were always meant to be, it healed. Its gray-brown eyes lit up with the fire of life once more. One morning, Elias opened the cage door, allowing it to step into the forest on its own. The lion turned to look back. Its gaze met Hyson. That moment stretched endlessly in his heart. No words were needed, no promises made. Just two beings who had once touched life and now, gently, let each other go into the vastness of nature. And Elias knew he would never forget those eyes. Years later, a familiar shadow returns. Now, Elias is no longer young. His hair has turned silver like mist. His hands are thin and sinewy, and his legs no longer hold the strength they once did. He lives quietly in the same old wooden cabin nestled beside the Zambezi Foresta place that still cradles countless memories from a life forever intertwined with the wilderness. Every morning he brews tea and sits on the porch, watching the mist dissolve through the gaps in the leaves. On the wall hang a few old photo frames, a sunset over a field, a baby elephant he once rescued, and at the center, a pencil drawing he made himself, a lion cub cradled in his arms, its eyes staring straight into the soul of whoever looks. Everything seemed to have faded into the past, until that rainy night. The wind howled across the porch. Branches knocked against the wooden walls with hollow thuds. As Elias sat by the fire reading, he suddenly heard a faint sound like labored breathing, dragging, broken. Then came a scratching at the door. Not loud, not aggressive, but weary, trembling, like a desperate plea in the darkness. He stood up abruptly. Though old, his heart was still as sharp as ever. When he opened the creaking wooden door, the light from the oil lamp spilled across the porch, and there, beneath the curtain of heavy rain, lay an old lion collapsed on the steps. Its fur was no longer snowy white, but a faded gray. Scars, both old and new, etched its weathered body, its skin rough and torn by thorns and stone. But its eyes, those eyes, though clouded with age, were unmistakable. Elias froze. His knees buckled instinctively, and his hand trembled to his lips. "It's you?" he whispered, voice catching. The lion lifted its head just slightly. It didn't growl. It only exhaled, then rested its head on the wet wooden floor. The rain continued falling, soaking its mane, dripping onto the old rug inside the doorway. And in that quiet moment, Elias felt as if his own heartbeat had merged with the faint breath before him. No one could explain what had brought it back after all these years, after a lifetime in the wild. But he knew, an invisible promise, a memory never forgotten, had led it home. In the dark, Elias knelt and laid his hand on the creature's trembling shoulder. "Come on, my boy, you're home now." In the flickering light of the oil lamp, Elias knelt on the porch, face to face with the creature he never expected to see again in this life. The old lion, once mighty, now worn and thin, was only a shadow of its former glory. But those eyes, calm, deep, were still the same. No longer wild with instinct, no longer guarded like a predator. Only a gaze that was gentle, resolute, and warm like a morning long ago, deep in a forest, when a human hand lifted a tiny life from a steel trap. Elias raised his hand, hesitating, afraid that with just one gentle touch, what was happening might vanish like a dream. His fingers brushed against the soaked fur. The lion did not pull away. It simply closed its eyes and let out a long breath soft as a sigh. Tears streamed down Elias's cheeks, hot and uncontrollable. He choked back a sob, his voice trembling. "You remember? You came back to me?" There was no reply, but the lion's heavy shoulders trembled slightly, as if it were saying, "I never forgot." Memories broke open inside him. The nights he stayed awake, holding the frail cub moaning in fever. The meals he secretly saved scraps of meat from, just so it could regain strength. The first soft roar it made when it was well again. And that final glance, the day it disappeared into the forest, those same eyes, now staring back at him. He leaned in close, gently stroking the wet mane, whispering as if to his own child, "You survived, you grew strong. I always hoped you'd be free, fierce, but I never thought you'd remember the way home." The lion rested its head on Elias's knee, breathing heavily but safely. His trembling hand kept gliding along its back, just as he had done all those years ago. Outside, the rain had softened. The forest wind whispered through the leaves like an old love song returning. In the little wooden cabin, between man and beast, an extraordinary reunion unfolded. No words needed, no promises exchanged. Only a gaze, a touch, and a love that had never broken with time. That night, Elias didn't sleep. He sat beside the old soul, heart quivering with joy and sorrow, for he knew some returns were miracles. By the dim light of the oil lamp, Elias carefully dipped a warm cloth into herbal water and wrung it out. He sat beside the lion lying near the fireplace, its body shivering from cold and exhaustion. With his aged, calloused hands, he wiped away the caked blood from its mane, gently cleaning the long-festered wounds, not to save it, just to ease the pain, to spare the creature further torment as its final breath drew near. There were no emergency medicines, no IV drips, no thick bandages. Only a man with weathered hands trying to return a shred of dignity to the wild beast's life slowly faded from those cloudy eyes. "Not everyone gets to die in peace," Elias whispered, his hand softly resting on the weakly rising chest. "You're luckier than many people." The lion didn't respond, but its body slowly relaxed, ears drooping, tail swaying faintly in what seemed like gratitude. It didn't need to roar. It didn't need to fight. It knew it was being loved. One last time. Elias laid an old blanket over its bony hips. His wife had once knitted it long ago to warm him on winter nights. Now he gave it away as a parting gift. The fireplace crackled softly, its flames casting flickering patterns across the wooden walls like memories rushing back. At Elias's feet, the lion breathed steadily, each breath growing longer, lighter, deeper. Its eyes closed slowly, without tension, without fear, as if it had finally found the right place to end its journey, the place where someone had once saved it from death and now was bringing it peace. The whole cabin fell into a silence so deep that the sound of night wind slipping through the doorframe could be heard. Elias didn't cry. He simply sat there, one hand resting on the lion's back, feeling each subtle movement. He knew when his hand could no longer feel the heartbeat, that would be the moment he had to let go. But he had no regrets, because he had kept the promise made long ago that if the lion ever returned, in whatever form, he would care for it to the very end. And now, that promise was being fulfilled in silence, in gentle darkness, in a little wooden cabin by the edge of the forest, where one man quietly tended to a soul about to return to nature. 3 days passed like a slow-moving dream, where time and fear no longer existed, only the stillness between two beings who had once belonged to each other. In that tiny house nestled against the woods, Elias and the old lion lived together like two old friends, reuniting after a journey too long. In the mornings, Elias sat on the porch, brewing tea as he had for decades. His other hand placed a bowl of water near the lion's muzzle. The creature didn't eat much, just licked a few sips of water and closed its clouded golden eyes again, as if dreaming of the days it once ruled the endless savanna. Elias whispered stories from his life the first time he met his wife, the scar on his hand from rescuing a trapped deer, the season's first rain that nearly washed away the ranger station. Sometimes he opened an old book and read aloud, not for anyone to hear, but to fill the silence between two fragile breaths. In the afternoons, he reheated thin porridge, poured a little into a porcelain bowl, and sat beside the lion. Once or twice it tried to lift its head, tried to rise as if out of instinct, but its legs trembled, and it slowly lay back down, resting its head near Elias's foot. Just like it did long ago, when it was a cub cradled in his arms on a stormy night. He didn't wave it away or scold. I simply stroked its head gently and said, "You don't need to try anymore. You can rest now." Its eyes fluttered, softened. Perhaps it understood. At night, when the wind howled through the forest, Elias laid an extra blanket over its body. The fire glowed warm across the room. The flames cast dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Old man and a lion, together, no longer man and beast, but two souls learning how to let go at the right time. There was no roar, no whimper, only the soft crackle of firewood, and the lion's steady, though sometimes faltering breaths, as it slowly walked the final steps of its life's journey. And during those 3 days, Elias came to understand something beautifully simple, that sometimes greatness doesn't lie in fighting until the end, but in being there, quietly and completely, until the final breath. That, too, is a way to love someone with a whole lifetime. On the 3rd night, the forest air was thick with the scent of cold soil, but the sky above sparkled with thousands of stars. Elias did not sleep. He sat beside the fireplace, now reduced to glowing embers, his worn old cloak draped halfway over his shoulders, one hand gently resting on the bony shoulder of the white lion. Its breath remained faint, slow like one last breeze brushing across a parched savanna. Elias said nothing more. No reading, no stories. Only silence like a watchman keeping vigil over a soul about to depart its body. Wind slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls, gently swaying the crooked frames hanging on them. Among them, one photograph showed a young Elias holding a lion cub, both their eyes bright with wonder beneath the wide-open skies of the wild. Around midnight, in the sacred stillness, the lion's breathing suddenly ceased. There was no roar, no final gasp, no twitch of struggle, just stopped. As gently as a falling leaf, as quietly as mist dissolving on the ground, as if it had simply closed its eyes for a long, peaceful sleep. Elias didn't realize it at first. It wasn't until a few minutes later, when he felt the fur beneath his hand growing cold, that he jolted upright. The lion's eyes were still slightly open, neither fierce nor afraid, just a tranquil gaze, as if it had seen enough, known enough, loved enough, and was ready to go. Elias lowered his forehead onto its own. Hot, bitter tears spilled freely down his weathered cheeks. He didn't cry out of fear of death, but because he understood. This lion, from the vast wilderness of the world, had chosen him as the place to take its final rest. Not a rocky den, not among its pride, but here on the porch of a wooden cabin where once, long ago, it had been given a second chance at life. "Good boy, go in peace," Elias whispered through a choked breath, his hand gently stroking the space between its ears, the very spot he used to soothe whenever it whimpered in pain during those fragile early days. Death, when no longer lonely, no longer panicked, ceases to be something to fear. That night, Elias sat quietly beside the now lifeless body of his wild friend, his eyes gazing up at the star-filled sky, as if sending a wordless thank you to a soul that came back not to die alone. The next morning, the sun rose beyond the horizon, casting a crimson glow across the forest, illuminating Elias's deeply lined face. He stood in silence for a long while beside the lion's white body, its form now cold, yet still seemingly holding the warmth of a soul not fully departed. No sound remained, except the slow, heavy rhythm of his own heartbeat. He chose not to return the lion's body to the forest. Instead, he picked a spot very close, behind the wooden cabin, beneath the old redwood tree that cast shade all year round the place where they once sat in silence watching the sunset years ago, when it was just a trembling cub in his arms. His hands trembled as he gripped the shovel. Each dig brought back another memory. His legs were weak, his back bent with age, but he wouldn't let anyone else do it. No one else could bury it with the same love he had poured into its life. When the grave was finally deep enough, he returned inside the house, retrieved a bundle of dried grass, the very kind he used to pick each spring morning, and gently wrapped it around the lion's body like one last blanket. As he laid it into the earth, he said nothing for a long time. Only when he covered the first handful of soil did he murmur, his voice hoarse and cracking, "Thank you for not forgetting me, for coming back, for choosing this place. I was always waiting." No one was there to hear, but he knew nature was watching. After he finished filling the grave, Elias found a flat stone near the dry creek, the same path they used to walk together in the early days. Beneath sunlight filtering through the leaves, he sat down and began carving into the stone by hand the words, "The resting place of one who spoke not with words but with loyalty." No date, no name, just a message powerful enough that anyone who stopped to read it would instinctively bow their head in silence. He sat beside the grave for a long time, his gaze lifted toward the canopy above where a few red leaves fluttered down like quiet tears. He no longer cried. His sorrow had dissolved into the wind, as gentle as the lion's final breath in the night. Farewells don't always require words, because there are some bonds where a final glance, a single touch, or simply a chosen place to rest is enough to complete a lifetime. The story of Elias and the white lion needed no narrator to spread. Those who worked at the reserve began to whisper it among themselves, as though passing down a sacred verse. They spoke of a stormy night when an old lion found its way to a weathered cabin where an old man, equally worn and solitary, sat beside a flickering hearth, waiting for something nameless. They said the lion had not come for rescue. It came only to do so in the very place where it had once been saved, like a circle closing, like a final thank you no roar could ever fully express. The small grave behind the wooden cabin, beneath the redwood tree, gradually became a sacred space zone no one dared disturb. Strangely, each dry season, even as the land cracked and withered elsewhere, wildflowers still bloomed brightly around the mound-white violet yellow as if answering a silent devotion. Elias lived on for a few more years, quiet as the forest wind. Each night, he lit a small lantern on the porch, its soft glow illuminating the weathered stone with the carved words. He never hoped for visitors, but if someone did happen to pass by, they would always stop for a long while as though their heart had brushed against something sacred. For young rangers newly entering the profession, the tale of the old lion who asked to die beside the one who once saved him became a silent reminder lesson in the deep, invisible bond between human and nature. Not enforced by chains, cages, or commands but by respect and unconditional love. Some would ask, was it true or just a legend? And the elders at the wildlife station would simply smile, their eyes drifting toward the distance where the old wooden cabin lay tucked beneath the trees, and beneath the redwood, a story still quietly lived on, never needing to be rewritten. Because there are legends that don't need books, only a place to return to, a hand that once saved a life, and a soul that never forgot. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story that reaches to the very depths of the heart. If you believe that between the deep forest and the city, between human and creature, there still exist magical threads of connection, join us in preserving and spreading that belief. Tap the like button to support stories filled with humanity and love for nature. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these emotional journeys where every story is a reminder that kindness and empathy can cross all boundaries. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever believed that one small act of kindness could change the fate of an entire life? And if you feel this story is worth spreading, share the video with a friend, because who knows, the next miracle might begin with you.